to introduce Ivan, and then he'll tell us a little bit about his background and what he does, and then hopefully we'll start the session. For those who are coming in, that they can pick it up, I think. So Ivan is the founder and CEO of Edison 365, with over 25 years of consulting experience in both innovation and PPM. And Ivan was the UK's representative for Microsoft on PPM strategy for a number of years, and a judge for APM, and is a speaker worldwide at innovation and project management conferences. So maybe, Ivan, if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I could wax lyrical, but I'm sure it would be better to come from you.
Thank you, Peter. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah, thanks. It's always super embarrassing, the introduction bit. That's something I really shirk from. But I have got a couple of slides just to paint the scene a little bit on my background. Excuse me if I keep looking in different directions. I do love making these sessions interactive. So especially if you're online and you're in the chat, I guess if you're in the offices, you could also maybe join the chat or ask the questions through the co-host there. And as Peter says, we'll do some slides with some polls throughout the course of it. So actually, on that note, let's go to the next screen, and I'll leave it up for a couple of seconds. Hopefully the screen's changed. Peter, you could just confirm. Could you?
Yep,
you can see
that's it? We can see that. Can
Lovely.
You see that in the room? Just someone put a hand up if they can, or shout out. Lovely,
Fab.
Thank you.
Fab. Technology, we're at the BCS. We hope that technology is going to support us today. If you have a smartphone, if you hold it up, you should be able to see that QR code. It should automatically take you to a link where you can join. And as we get to a slide, hopefully, fingers crossed, a poll will appear, and you can interact with it. And it's super useful for me because it gives me a little bit of feedback, understand the audience, and also helps me get knowledge as well. So these events for me are not just about me talking, they're about me learning from the attendees as well. So really would appreciate interaction on that. So maybe you happy for me to crack on, Peter, or do you want to wait a couple of minutes for people to join? Entirely up to you.
I think maybe if you could just talk a little bit, give it a couple of minutes till Simon's back in the room,
yeah,
because
okay.
he should be kind of logging people in. Simon, you're here. Okay,
Yeah,
are we good to go? Good. Okay. Yeah. So Ivan, yeah, carry on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So brief agenda rundown. So, I mean, the subject of this is it time for the PMO to embrace strategy and innovation? It's a passion of mine, something I talk about a lot, and we'll run through why the PMO should look into this, why the PMO has an opportunity to do a lot more than it does today. We'll talk a little bit, and maybe I'll get some input from you guys on what you believe the PMO does today. What I call an end-to-end PMO, and I'll introduce another acronym for you. I know we all love acronyms. It's the world of acronyms at the moment. So I'll talk about what this future PMO could look like. How can we go about making the change? So especially if you're in the PMO today or you're in strategy, what are the things we need to think about when we're moving from the typical PMO that we see in most businesses to one for the future? I have got a customer case. I'm just going to talk a little bit about HS2. And HS2 is in the news a lot, I know, but the team at HS2 are super impressive at how they are undertaking this end-to-end process. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I've got some stats from them about what they've been doing. Q&A at the end, but I've said to Peter that we'll kind of, he's going to monitor questions in the chat, and we'll maybe pause at certain spots, take some questions if people have got them in the room as well to make it interactive. So that's the agenda. I'm going to do a couple of slides on background, and really, I just want to paint the scene a little bit. Don't talk too much about myself, but this is my background. I started in projects, program, portfolio management way back, believe it or not, and I know I don't look as though this is true, but way back in '92 was my first role. And way back then, when we looked at project management systems, for example, my first project management system was an asterisk prompt. Fortunately, times have evolved a lot since then. I've worked across many different types of projects all over the world, lots of different things. But some of the exciting ones for me are, way back when were things like the Second Severn crossing. You probably all go across it, and probably some of you don't remember it being built, but that was one of the first projects I worked on. The Eden project, super famous, love it down there. That was one of my favorite things. Really amazing group of people down there. And then more latterly, things like HS2, and in the space of strategy and innovation and I guess more innovative thinking, something called the 100+ Accelerator, which is a venture from AB InBev, Colgate, Unilever and Coca-Cola to try and engage startups to bring new innovation to environmental sustainability and supply chain problems. So that's quite a cool one of late. So that's some of the things. I've done lots of things. I'm not going to go through all of these, but work with many organizations across the end-to-end process. But really today and over the last, I guess, 5 years, my focus has moved very much from just the pure PMO project management side of life through to really working with customers and hearing from customers who actually want to organize their business so that they can actually achieve the strategy they set out by essentially accelerating the rate of change and delivering real value and benefit to the business. So that's the space I'm in today. So I've got a question for you. It'll just help me a little bit understand the audience. It shouldn't take too long, I hope, and hopefully it will work. This is the first of 3 polls, 4 polls, something like that. But I'd love it if you could align yourself to one of these roles if you can, or if not, other is super good. Okay.
You can do this in the room if you've got phones.
Yeah, I love the interaction here. It's super exciting. Hopefully, do you see the results in the room? Can you see the screen moving? And yes, yeah, great. Okay, that's super cool. Lovely. I'll just give it another, I guess, 30 seconds just for people to finish. But cool. That's great. Thank you very much. And that's super interesting. I guess I should have, it's what I should have expected from a special interest group on project management, that most of the people will be from project management and PMO. That's great. Super useful for me as well. Interested to hear your feedback during this and at the end of it. And also, by all means, use LinkedIn to connect with me. I'd love to chat after the session as well if you want to engage. So thank you for that. That's the roles. Let's really get onto the main topic. And it always fascinates me because I've been having these conversations for years, and there are a few topics throughout the course of today's session that keep on being talked about, and I keep hearing from organizations, but they never get fixed, and I kind of am fairly perplexed at it. You would think in this day and age that organizations would be good at actually realizing strategy. Well, as you can see from some of these stats, and I'm sure there are many more stats from lots of different organizations that have surveyed the market. But as you can see, organizations are really super poor at realizing strategy. And when you look at the amount of change that's going on in society today, you would think that organizations have invested and attempted to improve and enhance this process. If we just draw out, a couple of these stats, 16% of executives feel their strategic processes are effective. shareholder value declining if you don't realize your strategy. 29% of projects were successful. I mean, that's an age-old one. That's been, despite my best attempts, that's been like it for ever since I started in this industry. And then 34% reporting they successfully execute their strategic initiatives. So I guess the conclusion is that despite everything, and by the way, there are lots of other stats as to how important this is for executives. So when you look at it, executives cite strategy as being one of the most important things in the execution of it. So you wonder, how can an executive board be accepting of having it as a super important thing and yet not delivering on it? Especially when it's incredibly clear what happens when we don't innovate and we don't accelerate our change, our rate of delivery of our strategy. And there are examples. These are, I mean, I guess maybe some of the most famous examples. There are many, many more. And actually, if we look at today in the UK, we'll see lots of them. And I've got a few thoughts on that as well. But when we look at these, you'll be familiar, hopefully, with them all, even though some of them really, Kodak goes way back to films as opposed to digital. But if we just take Blockbuster, it's a story probably you're familiar with. But Blockbuster was, I actually found my membership card the other day as well, weirdly. But Blockbuster was in the high street, is in virtually every high street in every town. And it was a global brand, not just a UK brand. And it was all about going and renting your video, as you know. Blockbuster failed to understand the rate of change in the world. And as such, Netflix came up and basically overwhelmed them. And we know the story. In fact, Blockbuster, I think, has one store now. It may be none, but I think it has one store. And Blockbuster were offered the opportunity to buy Netflix. Netflix was going through it had grown significantly, but it didn't feel it had the funding and the finances to take this further. Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy it, actually, as did Amazon as well. Amazon had the opportunity to buy it for 50 million at the time and failed to purchase it. And Netflix has gone on from strength to strength since then. So that's Blockbuster. Yahoo, same story. Yahoo was offered the opportunity to buy Google several times. I guess that's something they will regret considerably. So we can see, if we don't have good strategy, if strategy is not communicated, and if we're not delivering on our strategy and we're not changing and understanding disruption, then this is the type of thing that's going to happen to our organization. Great quote. Actually, he made it the other day from Mark Randolph. He was one of the founders of Netflix. Very clever man. Worth reading up about the story of Netflix and the amount of things they thought through before they thought of Netflix as the way forward. But if you're not willing in your strategy to look at how can we actually change our business significantly, not just incremental change, but disruptive change, then someone else is going to be doing it for sure. And again, you see it all the time. So the examples we had up earlier were, global brands that some of you will be familiar with, I'm sure. On a more local front, we can see again, the UK companies is no different from a global picture. FTSE 100, it's changing all the time. In fact, my 26 from the original list was a stat I did actually a while ago. It'll be completely different. I'm sure it's even less than today, a lot less than it was when I took the 26. Lots of these brands have departed, and again, it depends on your age as to whether you'll even remember people like Trust House 40 and Rank, but those guys didn't recognize the rate of change. If we look at today, if we look at organizations that have departed recently, Royal Mail, I mean, if you take a look at Royal Mail, an institution in the UK, but it hasn't adapted to change fast enough, to home deliveries fast enough, in the same way that Deutsche Post has. And you can see the success of DHL. And Marks and Spencer, again, it's not reacted to change rapidly. Its strategy is not encompassed online sales well enough, and so on. So RBS, another classic as well. Banking, banking was ripe for disruption. And I don't know if if any of you use modern apps nowadays that don't have banks, never have had banks, allow you to change your money into all sorts of currencies. Won't mention any brands, but RBS, another organisation that failed to realise, and it's not even called. I think it still exists, but under the NatWest brand again, as opposed to RBS. So hopefully you can see that the case for improvement in how we set about our what I would call end-to-end transformation strategy all the way through to delivery and benefit. Case for improvement is clear. All of our organizations can look at this in detail. Two last stats on this that I will draw your attention to. And I talked, I think, about executives and their thinking on this area. Well, 96% of organizations cite innovation delivery as among their top 5 strategic challenges, but 2/3 of companies are not seeing a return on investment. So you can see again, it's a case of organizations saying things are super important, but the reality is they're failing. And so they clearly aren't putting the level of importance onto those that they believe when they're responding to surveys. Good. So I guess the clear question for us is, why do organizations fail to deliver strategy? Now, there are many reasons. I wanted to focus, I'm actually going to focus on the third one clearly as the topic of today's conversation, but actually there are 3 that really for me constantly stand out when I look at the delivery of strategy within a business. And when we talk about strategy, and I've got slides that will talk about this a little bit more later on, the delivery of strategy, there are a whole bunch of elements involved in this. It's not just a project delivery process. It's a whole bunch of other things, from the strategy dissemination all the way through to the benefit realization. And as I say, we'll go over a process a little bit later. So for me, there are 3 key things at the start of this that really are leading to failure. The first of these, executive ownership. If you look at your business today, I don't know how many of you are working for organizations as opposed to working for yourself, but if you're working for an organization, who owns the end-to-end process for strategy? Not just the formulation of strategy, the vision, the mission, and then the strategy and the drivers and so on, but who owns the entire end-to-end process? And I can virtually guarantee, someone's going to put their hand up or comment in the chat in a second and tell me I'm wrong, but I can virtually guarantee that in your so the CEO for sure will own the owner of the overall strategy, but maybe being more specific, the CEO is not going to be hands-on responsible for the detail of making sure the end-to-end strategy is actually delivered. So yeah, quite right. But who is responsible for the organization that's going to define, deliver strategy, as well as the benefits that come out of it? And in most businesses that I work with, there's no single person responsible for that. Yeah, maybe the CEO at the board level we talk about, but when we talk about someone who's got the time to deliver and it's their sole responsibility, it's a rare thing that I'll ever see an organization with one person responsible for that. Most often, strategy is in one part of the business, delivery is in another part of the business, and there are other bits. R&D is in engineering, for example. So it's all not aligned together. The second part of this is investment. So if you want to deliver strategy, we'll talk about the process a bit more, which is where the investment really comes in. If we want to deliver this, not only have we got to have an owner, and we need a single owner who's responsible for this end to end, is my belief, but we also need to fund it adequately as well. And again, we'll talk about the PMO and where it sits in the organization and its funding today. But again, it's a constant frustration of mine that really strategy delivery is not funded well. There's not an organization responsible for it. There's not an owner for it. And the funding is significantly weaker than for many other parts of a business. And if you're not going to invest in something, it's not going to be realized for sure. And so that brings us on to the last one, which is organization. And this is going to be the focus of today. When we look at delivery strategy, again, there isn't an entity that is typically responsible for the end-to-end process. There will be maybe people in a strategy department responsible for brainstorming and working out the strategy and get it signed off with the CEO. There might be people in a PMO who are responsible for project delivery, so delivering the products that a project has defined. There might be people in R&D who are thinking out bright ideas of things that they might do to change whatever it is the organization makes or delivers. But all of those people and all of those entities are separate and not working together in a joined up process. I've never seen, I'm starting to see now a lot, but I've never seen up until the last couple of years, organizations who have understood that you've got to join this together properly if you're going to deliver the strategy. Otherwise, it's just disconnected. And so that brings us really onto the topic as we talked about. This is just a bit of background. Why should we do this? Why are we failing? What are the key things we need to change? And we're going to focus on organization today. And so let's talk a little bit about PMOs. I think, was it half of the attendees are, well, in fact, all of the attendees near enough are in project management, and half, I think, came from a PMO background. So I've got one more question for you. I hope you don't prove me wrong, but this is the purpose of these surveys for me. Does the PMO in your organization sit right up at the level of finance and other strategic functions? Well, or does it fit underneath R&D, underneath engineering, underneath project management, underneath I don't know, finance, operations, IT? Where does it sit within your business? And we're getting a mix of answers. It's great. I love this. I'll give us another just 1 or 2 minutes to just, well, not even as long as that, just a little bit, just to complete that. Great. It seems to have settled down. So I've got to say it's optimistic from the audience we have today, because if I go to an organization, I would think it would be 95% of the time, maybe higher, the PMO won't be sitting at the same level as finance. It will not have an owner of it equivalent to a financial director or that level of board representation. It would typically be sitting underneath another function within the organization. So it's super good to start seeing that a range of your organizations have recognized the importance of it. And for me, if the delivery organization, and when we talk about the end-to-end process, if it doesn't sit at the same level as these other business functions, it's not going to succeed, in my opinion. And this aligns really to the topic of investment, in that, I mean, I've got a slight bias on this because clearly I'm involved nowadays with systems for PMO. But all that being said, when we look at investment in finance, if finance decide that they need a new finance system, millions upon millions of pounds will be spent on finance systems for organizations to report effectively what's happened. So after the fact. Whereas when we look at the PMO and the PMO systems and investment in the PMO, it's quite often a struggle to get investments of, £30,000 or £40,000 or £50,000. And for me, it always amazes me, because finance is clearly, you need finance. You've got to report to your shareholders, stakeholders, and everything else. So you need your finance system. Not debating that. But what's remarkable is finance reports what's happened. The PMO and this part of your business enables you to change what's going to happen, right? So This is the part of the business that can actually make a complete and utter difference to your organization. This is the part of the business that can stop projects that are failing. This is the part of the business that can enable you to make the right decisions. This is the type of part of the business that can encourage investment in innovation to take you forward. So I'm always perplexed as to why business leaders find it so hard to put an investment into the PMO function. But good to see 38% of you guys are in a business that's starting to recognize the need to make that change. Now, one more. I think I've only got one more after this. So, but Slido's not going to stop you making 10 selections. So all I'd ask you is just if you could try and limit it to 3. Technology is going to not support me in this, but I'm just keen to understand. When I say issues, what are the things that you think the PMO fails to deliver maybe, or struggles with, or is not as successful as it is with other things? I certainly obviously have my own view of this, but I'd love to see what I didn't actually put those at the top, by the way, for a reason. I don't know. I actually reordered this in a completely different way. So fantastic. What a mix. I guess this is a difficult question, isn't it? Because I think really PMOs struggle with all of these things. It's just to a varying degree, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, great. So this is interesting. I think the one that's number one is my number one, without a doubt. Benefit realization, and it's a sweeping statement. Excuse me, anyone in the room who is good at this, but for me, I've never encountered an organization that is good at it. My findings working with many organizations is that it's all all great. We'll put some benefits in a business case at the start of the project, and maybe we'll track some benefits during the project, but post project we all forget about it and rush off and do something more exciting. And that typically is because the PMO is focused on delivery and not really on the other side. The other elements before and after delivery seem to get missed because it's not focused. They haven't got the resource, the investment, the infrastructure, and so on. So yeah, benefit realization, couldn't agree more. Governance, I guess, and delivery are where I typically think of PMOs focusing their energy, but there are inherently always problems there. Resource management, yeah, it's very difficult in businesses to get a picture of capacity versus requirements across the whole landscape. Obviously technology can help, but it is super difficult. There's lots of processes, and again, time and investment involved, because to get real capacity planning, you've got to have everything in something in order to understand what's going on, and you never have enough resource as well. Change management, I think actually, I mean, maybe that's come lower down because it's not necessarily a focus for PMOs. I find lots of PMOs are really more focused on governance and delivery and maybe resource management than they are actually on change management. Sometimes it sits elsewhere. Actually, I saw one of our attendees mentioned that they've got 2 PMOs, one under IT, but also another PMO responsible for change itself. Change management, again, it's another interesting one in that when we look at organizations, another area that also amazes me is that we're willing as businesses to spend, hundreds of thousands of pounds on a technology solution, but only, £50 on actually the change management to make sure people use it and adopt it. Almost fascinates me how poorly invested change management is in a business, because if you're going to get a new solution, you need people to use it. If you only get 60% of the usage, you get 60% of the value. So that's another one that fascinates me. Innovation and pipeline management, it's come really low down here. again, I'm going to hypothesize that that's because really I don't actually think PMOs are responsible for it at the moment. I think they're really responsible further up here. And then business case evaluation, it's actually off my list. Is that because no one's put it on theirs as an issue maybe? And again, I think that's possibly because maybe business cases don't come under the PMO as the area of responsibility. So there, thank you very much for that. That's super cool. Now, PMO, I've used the word PMO, and actually, as you see the stat on the right-hand side, 65% of organizations are using the word PMO, or there are, it's a widely used term. There are lots of other terms as well. Lots of other acronyms. I'm going to talk about IPMO. I'm going to add another one. Don't have to call it IPMO, but it's a phrase I use in order, or an acronym I use in order to paint a picture. Enterprise PMO, P3, Project Portfolio, Program Management Office, whatever, VPMO. New one I saw the other day, actually, Value PMO. I quite like the connotations that the PMO is responsible for delivering value. I think that's really, benefits, outcomes, value. That's where we should be focused as a business. I've got one last question, and it's just for my personal interest. I'd be super cool. Actually, I thought I put a multiple choice in here, but clearly I didn't. But actually, maybe it's better. Have you got an acronym or a wordage for your PMO that's not PMO? It would be super cool. Does it allow you to? Yeah, it allows you to type. Oh, it's a word cloud, isn't it? Dave. Now, is that real or is that someone? I love it. BizOps. Your PMOs, no, that's interesting. Business operations, yeah. BMD, business management. This is great. So actually, it's not acronyms so much. It's actually terminology as well, much more connotation in there. Center of excellence, love that. I think that PMO is super specific, I would guess. Delivery management. Not too common, as in we're not getting I guess I anticipate we get like a big PMO in the middle, because that would be what most of you are using. But this is great. So again, lots of diversity, project support office for sure. Yeah, PMO, there we are. I didn't type either, just so you know, it's not me affecting the outcomes of these scores. I think there's a couple just lovely. I think that's everyone. So PMO is still the most popular. I guess that's what I expected. But other names and some very specific ones, I would think to some of the organisations that are attending. Cool. Thank you very much for that. So yet another name. IPMO, Integrated Innovation and Portfolio Management. For me, it's just an acronym, but it's really what's more important is what does it do? So, and this is the space hopefully you guys joined at the start was really where you wanted to hear about why should we do this and what's it all about? So why do we need an IPMO? And these for me are the problems, and you guys have filled in some online questionnaires there for me, which have helped for sure. But when I look at an organization and when we talk about strategy all the way through to execution and benefit realization, what I see in businesses is that there's very rarely an organization responsible for it all. It's typically split up across the business, as we talked about. So what does that mean? It means end-to-end visibility is unavailable. So can we understand as an organization, can you go somewhere and can you see or talk to a part of the business that can tell you this is our strategy, these are our strategic drivers, this is the innovation that we've been driving that aligns to it, because we need to change and we know we need to do incremental and disruptive innovation in order to align to and deliver our strategy. These are all the things that have come through that we're thinking of doing. These are the projects that are going to deliver it. These are the benefits that are going to be delivered, and the benefits align to the strategy and to driving the direction of the business. I would suggest that maybe if there's someone in the audience who's doing that today in their organization as an entity responsible for it, you're leading the charge on this, because typically you can't get that picture. And if you can't get that picture, how on earth do you know that your strategy is going to be delivered, and how can you make decisions to change rapidly to accelerate it? There are basic things. Again, you go to an organization and you speak to, big organizations especially, 99% of the people in the organization will not have a clue what the strategy is and not know how they can actually help to enable the organization to achieve it. One for me, bugbear for me, failing projects are not stopped. Again, if you look at surveys, it comes up highly. When I talk to businesses, when I talk to leaders of strategy and project delivery, they still are not able to stop a project. And it's because they don't have the information that enables them to make the decision. So they don't know that this project at this moment in time is not delivering the benefits that it said. It's going to cost more. And there are other things that align better to the strategy that are going to deliver. They don't have the visibility that we talked about before. Lots of stuff is never aligned. I don't know if this is common in your businesses, but stuff just happens. Projects happen. Someone powerful or in a different business unit just decides to do stuff, but isn't going to deliver anything of value to the strategy and the direction of travel of the business. We talk about business cases. I don't see many organizations who revisit the business case particularly. I know, some of you will probably do it, but lots of organizations do the business case and they never revisit it. Well, what I can tell factually for you is that if you don't revisit business cases, what it does is people learn, right? Because you have intelligent employees, they learn that no one is ever going to look at the business case, and not maliciously, but business cases will start to get aligned to things that people want to do. Benefits will be overestimated because they want to get stuff through that is stuff that they believe is important, as opposed to it really is important and it's going to be measured and they're going to be accountable for it. And I guess that brings me on to the last one. Benefits are rarely tracked to realization. Super important for me. Organizations definitely fail at this, but it's becoming more and more important. People have always talked about it, but I'm actually hearing it when I talk to organizations, senior people again, saying we are really going to focus on this. And the reason that they're rarely tracked to realization is really the PMO doesn't focus on it. The PMO focuses on the here and now and the delivery. It doesn't focus on benefits that are 2 years past the actual project delivery piece. So for me, the IPMO is all about embracing all of these elements under a single entity, taking responsibility and accountability. And we have a couple of last quotes. I think they're my last quotes. I love that Edison, obviously, is the name of the company I founded, but vision without execution is just hallucination. We can all come up with brilliant strategy. If we don't execute it, not that useful. And then there's one from me. That's a picture of me, believe it or not. When I first started, that's my first job that we talked about in '92. Anyway, if we don't execute things that are aligned to the strategy, you're just going to waste your money and be disappointed, as most execs from the stats are today. So we need to execute, and we need to execute the things that are aligned to our strategy. So here's what we've been waiting for. I hope you've been waiting for, maybe, but this is my very simple business process. Clearly, there's a lot more to this, lots of sub-processes, but at the high level, this for me is the responsibility of an IPMO. And this is where we should, as businesses, be headed. This is where we should have one organization responsible. So if we take a look in its most basic form at a end-to-end process, and I talk about transformation, not digital transformation, we're all familiar with that if we're from the BCS, I'm sure, but business transformation. This is the execution of your strategy, the delivery of the benefits. So for me, it comes into 5 key phases. The definition of the strategy in the first place, which, yes, for sure, should be owned by the CEO as absolutely what it is. But we need an executive, for me, that's responsible for all 5 of these circles. Today, in most businesses, I would suggest in most businesses, you have an executive responsible for the strategy, or it comes under someone. The innovation space or ideation is typically an R&D, or maybe another person, and the delivery space, another person. Again, so I would suggest that you've got at least 3 people, maybe 4 with justification. So let's talk about these further. So strategy, definition of what it is. We need to disseminate this information as well. I mentioned a failing in businesses in that most people in the organization probably have no idea what the strategy is. So we need a part of our business that is responsible for the delivery of strategy, but also the communication so that everyone is on board and is driving in the same direction, if we're ever going to expect it to happen. At the start of this, we've got to set up not just the strategy, but what we expect to come out of it and how long it's going to take. If we move into the next section, innovation or ideation. Now, some businesses will think of this in their R&D team as coming up with new widgets. Really, it's much more. Innovation or ideation should embrace the whole business. It should look outside as well. And we're finding this increasingly when I'm working with customers, that they're embracing their supply chain and their customers in the innovation process. We've got this strategy, but hey, all of you people within our business, you know about our strategy. These are the things we need to change. What ideas have you got that are going to help us make that change? So the ideation or innovation piece is all around solving problems, changing the direction of the business, aligning to the strategy to make a difference. And as I say, it really needs to engage not just a few people, the R&D team, it needs to engage the entire business, it needs to engage the supply chain and the customers. Anecdotally for you, we're working with a very large medical devices organization who are focused on their supply chain for innovation. Within 3 months, 6 months, I think it is, of embracing that, they've had $40 million of savings come from that one embracing the supply chain with coming up with innovation to drive the business forward. So, you know, those are numbers. Clearly, it's a big company, big numbers, but that gives you an idea. So innovation, ideation, defining challenges, solving problems, driving the business strategy forward, coming up with new things that are going to deliver it. The justification phase, well, for me, most organizations have this, but it's not done necessarily that well. I'm being very negative, apologies, but it's not for me done in a particularly good way. This is the business case piece. It's in the center, and for me, it's a core piece because we absolutely need to put a business case together. It needs to be evaluated alongside all the other business cases. It needs to be followed all the way through to the benefits realization process. So we need to be able to look at it in terms of benefit, cost, resources, risks, everything else. How does it actually align to the strategy? Is it going to make a difference to us as a business? So again, you need a part of the business that is responsible and understands the strategy, understands the new things coming down the pipeline, looks at the business cases, looks at everything else, looks at what's in delivery, looks at where we are benefit-wise in the delivery, and makes the decisions. Do we stop? Do we start? Do we optimize? What do we do? Justification. Quite often, elements of it are in the PMO, but you'll make your own judgments on that. Sometimes in finance, of course, as well. Business cases quite often are owned by the finance team. We then move into delivery. Typical PMO ground, all familiar with it, I'm sure. This is about, we've said delivering the outcomes, delivering the products if we're in the Prince 2 world, but it's about, we said the project was going to do X, Y, and Z. It's going to, we're going to have a new finance system at the end of it. That's what delivery is all about. Hopefully, it's all about embraces change management as well. As I said, it's not something that I see hugely successfully in lots of organizations, but delivery, change management should be all together. Realizing benefits as well, but I put it in there because whilst we're in delivery, clearly there will be some benefits. Typically, though, most benefits don't happen during delivery. And this is where the traditional PMO stops and benefits just get forgotten about. So end to end, the IPMO is responsible for the whole process from start to finish. It sits at an executive level. It's owned by a senior executive. It has responsibility to people, funding, finance, and all those types of things to carry it out. And yeah, there's a slide that just talks about it. It has a lot of different skills required, and we'll touch on this. We'll touch on this as we go into some more slides, because it's the typical people in the PMO today are brilliant at doing certain things. An IPMO needs additional skill sets, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But the IPMO is not just responsible for delivery and quality assurance and governance that we've talked about before, and reporting, super good quite often at reporting in there already, but other elements that I think are weak, like the marketing and communications, the noise, the pronouncing of success. You know, we've done great stuff with this. These are new challenges. This is the strategy. This is what's going on in an organization. Not so good typically. And mentoring and guidance. I really feel that this is a piece that PMOs have an opportunity with. Some are doing, but if we're going to have an entity that's responsible for this that has had enough funding, because mentoring and guidance is going to require some money and people. But really, this is about going out to the business and making sure everyone is on board with the processes, everyone is aligned, and helping them come up with the right challenges that align to the business, and when they don't understand, helping them with the answers. It's about helping people manage projects more effectively and so on. So some of it's done. It's much more than just some training courses, though. It's really full-on mentoring and guidance. So that's what the IPMO is. That's the opportunity for organizations, and we are seeing more of it and working with more organizations that are embracing this. Some of the benefits that we see being realized, and I've talked about, I guess, a lot of these, but a single entity that can report end-to-end strategy to benefit realization. The CEO actually gets a picture of exactly what is going on in the organization. You'll get accountability. If you get that visibility, you start to get accountability as well. People start to get super interested. We get more and more approached by organizations whereby the innovation team or are failing to get the funding that they expect. And it's because what the innovation teams are good at is coming up with great ideas. But what innovation teams are not good at is actually showing what was delivered, what the benefits were that their innovations actually were all about. So if you can't do that, it's very hard to get more funding for innovation. So it's circles. It's super important to have that end-to-end visibility. We talked about benefits being realization. We've talked about accountability and so on. The other thing is, if you can combine what might already be in your business, this delivery entity of the PMO or whatever it might be called in your organization, with the innovation piece, you'll get the best of two cultures. And they are very different cultures, by the way. Having worked extensively with both of these as separate organizations and melding them together, what we get, and if you're familiar with personality profiles, this aligns quite well to profiles in project delivery. Quite often, and again, sweeping statement, not everybody falls into this, but typically within project delivery, it's people and structure that is very organized. It is very good at accuracy, at reporting, at numeracy, and all of those core. Administrative is not the right word, right? But hopefully you get my gist. But then if we look at the innovation side of the business, if you've ever worked with innovation people, if you've got them in your organization, they are, if you look at profiling, they've got very high eyes. If you're familiar, this will mean something. But basically, they're typically jazz hands. They're very effusive. They're talkative, communicative, wanting to excite. Now, innovation could really make use of having some structure and organize and factual reporting and management. So it benefits enormously from this joining together. But at the same time, for me, project delivery really needs this excitement that comes from the other part of the business. Project management is and the PMO is often looked at as an overhead, something that's quite dry. If we start to inject it with the enthusiasm and the energy and the marketing and the front and center announcements, yeah, we'll see the difference. So that's the combination of people. If we want to make the change, what do we have to think about? So I think I've got 8 elements, and you know, they apply to lots of things. But if we want to put this in, if we don't think about these, in fact, there's 7. If we don't think about these 7 things, we're definitely not going to be successful. So sponsorship. My number one probably of this whole thing is if this is going to be an initiative from a middle level, not there's anything wrong with middle level line management, but if it's going to be an initiative from there, it's not going to work. This has got to come from the top, and it's got to be invested in and bought into at the highest level if you're ever going to make this stick within the organization, because it's going to impact you across the board with, you know, people moving to different business units. It needs funding. The culture is going to change, all sorts. So it needs that sponsorship if we're going to do this properly. You need a strategy to how you're going to do it. You know, you can't just go, tomorrow we're going to have an IPMO. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? What's your time? It's a project or a program, probably more likely a program of change within your business to end up with this single standardized entity. You need your end-to-end processes. So anyone who knows me knows that I'm not super big on lots and lots and lots of processes, because people, you know, don't read them. But you need standards, and you need process, and you need gates, and you need things for people to follow in order to deliver the end-to-end cycle. The organization piece, I've talked about it. It's not going to work if you have two entities. When I survey organizations and work with organizations with an innovation team and a project delivery team, they don't talk to each other very well. It's rare the innovation team know what's being delivered, and when you talk to PMO, they never know what's coming down the pipeline. So you've got to have a single entity with a single responsible and accountable individual. We need to look at the culture, because there's going to be the changes in the culture in the PMO to move to this IPMO functionality, but there's also going to be, you know, a cultural change in the business as well to be aware of. Communication, front and center. I've talked about it. PMO not so good at it. Innovation normally a little bit better, but we certainly need to communicate the change, what's going on to the business. We need to engage people if we're going to deliver strategy effectively, if we're going to transform. We want everybody in the business to understand that and them to be able to contribute to this. The best ideas will come from all sorts of places, right? You'll have people in your organizations who are coming up with, you know, great thinking, but it never goes anywhere because there's no vehicle, there's no way for them to engage on that journey. So single entity to do that. And then lastly, technology. Clearly vested interest if anyone knows me, but you need a piece of technology or pieces of technology that are going to underpin the end-to-end piece, because what the holy grail of this is a picture, a set of reports that show you end-to-end what's happening in the business as far as that transformation lifecycle is concerned. So those are the things to think about. I promised to talk about a quick case study. I know I'm close to kind of the hour, but I think we've got some time for Q&A as well. So what I will do is just jump into the case study. I won't spend too long on it. I'll just give you a little bit of an example, and then we can do some Q&A as well. So we're going to talk about HS2. I absolutely love HS2. They really impressed me in how they're invested in this end-to-end transformation. I know it's up and down in the press, and I know it's spending too much money, or it's going to cost lots more because, you know, inflation has absolutely hit it. So there've been some cutbacks recently, you would have seen. But the teams we're dealing with there and the leadership from the top is absolutely focused on transformation, not just of HS2, but also of construction and civil engineering all up. So they want to leave a legacy of transformation for the industry, not just for HS2. Some stats about it, you're probably also, I've talked at some global events on this, and no one globally really knows what HS2 is, but it's staggering the size of it. It's Europe's largest infrastructure program. As a business, they have set out their strategic drivers. These are the 4 things in transformation land that they absolutely, everything has to align to. So they are driving as much change and innovation and benefit realization aligned to these elements as they possibly can. So that was the first thing they did as an organization. The second thing is they look to embrace the entire ecosystem. We're seeing this more and more. Typically when we think of transformation, the first target is internal. You know, let's get the business working in this way, and let's engage our staff on how do we move forward and do disruptive and incremental innovations to achieve our drivers. But HS2 set out on day one to do that internally. So absolutely changes within the business itself and people within the business itself that can help optimize. But they went out to a range of other areas. So they have an accelerator program, all managed by this entity, and the entity is responsible not just for driving innovation aligned to that strategy, but also the delivery of it. It's accountable for everything. So the accelerator program was a set of challenges to small enterprises, so that there are lots of super cool companies out there that have things that they're thinking about. HS2 wants them to come up with those ideas to help make a difference and to hit their transformation targets. And then fairly forward thinking, they decided to engage their supply chain as well. So, this is a customer of mine, so I can talk about, I know what's going on there. They've engaged all 25,000 people who are in the entire end-to-end supply chain. So this is all of the joint ventures that are working on this delivery. All of them are engaged and targeted with delivering transformation for HS2. That's quite revolutionary. They are absolutely targeted with the delivery. And if we focus on that supply chain, because for me it's quite exciting, the HS2 team have got the transformational objectives. The joint ventures are all aware of it. They all come together very regularly, representatives from the JVs, these 25,000 people working on the delivery. The HS2 team set out the key challenges that they need to achieve in order to make the transformation. Those JVs take those challenges on board, and those JVs then engage their 25,000 people, basically. So there'll be the representatives who are, in theory, the equivalent of the HS2 team, but in the JV. Those people within the organization will come up with things that will solve those problems, that will move HS2 through, and then if they're successful, they'll go through a process whereby they'll go through a business case process to align it, to get it justified and approved, and then all the way through to delivery. And HS2 will fund some of this stuff. Some of this will be funded externally as well. So it just depends on the opportunity. And all the way through this, the benefits are being measured. So the ideas have benefits, the business cases have much more detailed benefits, and the projects are responsible for delivering the benefits. And the projects stay open, the delivery stays open until the benefits are actually realized. Last few screens. I'm not going to dive into this in much detail, but and the slides will be there for you to look at. But this is an example of what they're doing. This is the first piece of this, whereby they're engaging on this transformation with the organizations. They're getting ideas. Essentially, this is a high-level form whereby people are filling in. There's lots more to it, but people are filling in within the JVs, are filling in things that are going to achieve some sort of alignment to the strategy. So they'll be putting in high-level time benefits, cost benefits, carbon reduction super high on HS2, as I guess it is on lots of organizations. So they'll fill that data in. Once it goes in, it then goes through the investment appraisal. And what you'll see here is a lot more detail starts to get filled in. The forms become way more sophisticated at this stage, and lots more pages, lots more data is collected. And then finally, all the way through, as I say, we're not going to focus too much, but we start to look at the monthly spend, the benefit realization plan. All of the detail is collected in the third set of information. There'll be a project plan that's managed as well, all of the typical PPM undertaking. But all of this is one organization within HS2. So this is not responsibility of lots of different people. It's the responsibility of one senior leader, and one part of the business is responsible for it. And what have they done? Well, it's still early days relatively. HS2 is a massive, I can't remember the number of years. It was on the slide before, I think. It's a massive undertaking, but already we can see actually they've got a reasonable budget. But given the scale of the program, it's not that big, but they have got a budget to spend. So £5 million budget, but their savings, and bearing in mind a lot of the transformation is not just about savings, it's about changing the industry. It's about carbon footprint changes, significantly about carbon footprint changes. So they've saved 200 million to date, which is clearly a massive return on the investment already. not taking into account all the other benefits. And they have over £1 billion planned to be saved during the course of this transformation program that's going on. So we're talking huge numbers. It's a huge organization with a massive spend, but scale it down to your organization. And we talked about the medical devices company with 40 million. You know, these numbers are possible if we set out and we have the investment to undertake this properly. That's all I really wanted to run through. I think I'm, you know, about bang on sort of the timings we'd hoped for when we set this up. There are some white papers from us, called white papers, maybe just papers that you can download on this subject if you want to. I don't know why that's happened. There must be an auto timer on this from an event, I guess. There's a but basically, if you want to hear more, actually, maybe I'll leave this one up. If you want to hear more, you want to interact, you want to chat to me, I'd love to connect to anybody who's interested in this subject. I love building my network of knowledge and hearing stories from other organizations. So feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn, drop me a line on email. Those are probably the best two methods. Or I might see you at another event. I tend to be at a lot of the events. So it'd be lovely to have a chat in person. On that note, I've talked for a reasonable amount of time, Peter. I'll pause.
No, brilliant. Thank you for that. So we haven't, I've just been looking at the chat window, and I don't think anyone's got much on there really, other than I just wanted to go back to a point you made about I think one of the biggest changes or who owns it, or you know, in terms of strategy. And I think Asim mentioned culture, and just maybe your thoughts on culture and how you mentioned it in your 6-7 criteria for kind of change. How difficult is it to change culture?
Well, it's probably one of the most difficult things to change, in all honesty, and it has to come from the top down. You can't, I mean, yes, you can get a general groundswell, but really, if you want to get culture change embedded, you need it to come from the top down. There's two elements to this, of course. There's the cultural change within the entity I've talked about, the IPMO, because you've got two very unaligned cultures joining together if you've already got two of these aspects. Innovation, super excited. Project delivery, PMO, focused on the facts and the numbers and the actuals, and those two clash, right? In that innovation people don't want to talk about the numbers, and project management people probably don't want to shout and stand up in the organization and espouse what's going on. So the first thing is the melding of that those two cultures. That just takes a really good leader of the business unit to do it, and the recognition. There are lots of things you can do on this. I talked about profiles of Thomas assessments. If you undertake, and this is not something we do, by the way, I'm just talking about things. I've certainly seen and found when people understand a lot more about the personalities of their colleagues, it helps meld the team together. So if you understand that John is super excitable and that's what motivates him, and if you want to deal with him, these are the things that are going to appeal, you're going to get a much better relationship than just thinking he's very fluffy and I'm not interested in him because it's what's it all about. So stuff like that, where you actually learn about your colleagues, makes a big difference to cultural change and melding of those two parts of the business.
Thank you. Just a question for those in the room down in London. Any questions from the floor?
You should just be able to speak. The room mics are on. Please do ask questions.
I've got a question. I was just typing it in the thing. What's the best and worst career advice you've ever received? And if you could make it relevant to project management, that would be even better.
Wow. The worst career advice, well, these are very personal ones, right? So they might not be so relevant, but the worst career advice I had was when I was at, I'm quite effusive, right? So innovation floats my boat, even though I came from a project delivery background. And the worst career advice I ever had was that I should be an actuary. No idea how they came up with that, because that is absolutely fully on numerics. And the best career advice was very early on in my life. Maybe this is not answer your question, but when my parents got super frustrated with me many years ago, they actually sent me to a careers advisor who did profiling on me, right? This is way back, so super early days of this type of stuff. And their recommendation was for me to start my own business. Now, that's my best and worst career advice that I received. I guess the best career advice I could give anyone, bearing in mind I've been in business for a long time, is that you should do something that you enjoy, because it will take its toll if you don't. Does that help at all? Maybe not.
Thank you very much.
Maybe too generic.
Some other questions? Anyone?
There's something else in the chat, Peter.
Oh, okay. Let me have a quick look.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Sorry, I'm nearly there.
I've got it if you haven't, Peter.
Yeah. Will you be taking on the perspective sharing regarding on reviewing the business case throughout the cycle? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a positive feedback. I love that. And when we talk about cultural change, that will help change your culture. Because if everyone, I mean, I learned years ago when you put in project management systems, and these project management systems were super sophisticated, but the reality was that people only looked at a couple of reports. That I learned that what would happen is people would only fill in the bits of information that were in those reports. So all the other important things never got happening, because it was, have we got a green indicator, for example? They'd fill that bit in. So yes, culturally, doing the business case, revisiting it during the project and post-project, same as the benefits. Can't overemphasize, if you have people accountable for every single benefit, it'll make a difference as to whether or not they get achieved and how real they are as well.
Thank you.
Something in from Enrico there as well.
No, bear with me a second. Will the innovation and strategy insights discussed in the session on PPP also be applicable with product management? Yeah,
so I think so. And I can give you my personal experience of that, because having founded a product company 4 years ago or whatever it was now, for sure we have a strategy, and all of our innovation is aligned to that strategy, and we're constantly going through, coming up with new ideas, evaluating those ideas. Are they going to align to our strategy? And then going through the delivery cycle. I mean, we're in quite an agile approach to that, but absolutely, yeah, I think innovation strategy, you need it in product management as well.
Okay, you mentioned, well, I mean, the whole topic is around changes in PMO, but you talked about disruption in project management. What other disruptors, I think, have you seen recently in kind of management?
I mean, the one, I hate talking about it because everyone's talking about it, aren't they? But AI is just the rate of change. I mean, if your business isn't thinking this through at the moment, it's going to transfer. You've heard it from everybody else, but just it's going to change every single thing. We're seeing examples already of AI whereby of just ChatGPT basically. Or OpenAI, whereby you ask it, produce me a project plan that is for a XYZ initiative that's going to take this period of time, that is for this type of thing, and it will produce it for you, given the right interfaces and hookups. stuff like that. What are the risks that are common that people are seeing across this type of thing? And it will come up with risks for you. So it's going to change every single aspect of our lives and every single thing, good, bad, who knows. But for me, that's the absolute number one thing.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? So any kind of final comments, Ivan, that you're...
Well, I mean, not really. If you've got anything else, I'd love to hear from you. Is the main thing. And if you do embark on this, if your business isn't already embracing this single entity, I'd love to hear how you get on and how you get to, depending on where you sit in the organisation, how you get people to listen. Always interested to hear that. It's the trouble is not necessarily the easiest thing to get the appreciation of the requirement to do from senior executives. Hopefully some of these stats might help you with that perspective as well, and some of the slides.
Good, thank you. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we're going to make the recording and the slides available to the participants after you. Okay, so thank you. And thanks. For those in at the London office, there's a kind of networking session afterwards, so please get involved with that. For those online, thank you for your participation, and thank you for being involved.